Hey Deb,
Hello, how are you?
good.
Glad to. Thanks again for having me on. I just realized I needed to grab a couple more links, like the famous or infamous, there you are, famous or infamous 5 day before Trump leaves office, Trump dumps the environmental impact statement for Oak Flat. That was a biggie. That was
Um,
crazy.
so I was looking, are we like on? Is the webinar started? Or is
I
this
think
kind of like the host room?
usually there's a backstage. It looks like
Yeah.
there's three attendees, and we're the three panelists. So I think it is starting.
Okay. Um, well, I will so I'm just gonna change the order, Deb, and have you go first because I thought that
Okay.
might be a better broad overview, and then Bidtah can jump on and talk about specific context around the Colorado River.
Okay. That that's fine with
Okay.
me. Um whatever will help make things work right. So I like your backdrop. Mine's just a boring old newsroom.
It's not boring. The newsrooms are exciting.
So Talia, if you
Oh.
want, I think you can pause the recording until folks come
Oh,
on,
okay.
and then we
Yeah.
can like trim this down.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you're having a great day and a great week and are excited for the upcoming holidays. Thanks for joining our Indigenous Women's Leadership Network webinar. This is our winter webinar, and we wanted to talk a bit about the changes that are forthcoming within the administration change at the presidential level, and how environmental issues are looked at, and then talk specifically about the Colorado River. So I would like to put up a couple slides just to talk a bit about what the Indigenous Women's Leadership Network is, introduce myself, our staff, and then we'll go ahead and get started on the speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mira.
Yeah, let me
Um,
screen share quick. Thank
okay.
you.
So my name is Talia Bear. I am an enrolled member of the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. I'm also uh, a Navajo, originally from Arizona, but I live and work out of Boulder, Colorado, for an organization called Western Resource Advocates. I am also the program coordinator for the Indigenous Women's Leadership Program, Leadership Network, excuse me. And we are a initiative under the Water and Tribes Initiative, IWLN for short. And so what IWLN does, if you want to go to the next slide, is we are a program that offers professional development, webinars, conferences, networking events, and scholarships to Indigenous women who work within the Colorado River Basin. I work alongside a intern that we have for this academic year. Her name is Summer Powell. She's not able to be here today because she's in grad school and is in finals this week. But I would love to ask Mira Barney, who is our program assistant, to introduce herself.
Yeah, great to be here. My name is Mira Barney. I've been working with Indigenous Women's Leadership Network since 2022. It's an incredible group and initiative, and I feel really honored to be here. IWLN program assistant, do a lot of help behind the scenes. So you'll see me here on the back end, but great to be here.
Thanks, Mira, and thank you all for your work in getting this program working. So a couple photos there of some of the events that IWLN has done. The first photo is a World Water Week panel session that we held featuring Indigenous women working in water policy across the globe. Lorelei Cloud, our founding co-chair, was a part of that panel. And then on the right was last week's IWLN dinner at the Colorado River Water Users Association conference. You can go to the next slide, please. IWLN has 4 co-chairs. We have Chairwoman Amelia Flores from Colorado River Indian Tribes, Bidtah Becker from Navajo Nation, also a co-founder of IWLN, Wendina Lee Gatewood, the former tribal chairwoman of White Mountain Apache Tribe, and Darnella Melanson from the Quetzon Tribe, former tribal council member. We provided scholarships to 5 students last week to attend the Colorado River Water Users Association conference. This is a photo of our co-chairs, our staff, and some of the students who were funded. And Mira's going to throw in a link if you would like to join the network. We do newsletters and then webinars, of course. I did want to mention one thing before we get started, and that is the Indigenous Women's Leadership Network is going to be housed going in 2025 at the National Wildlife Federation. And we have a job opportunity. It's the Tribal Leadership Programs Director. They will dedicate half of their time to coordinating of the Indigenous Women's Leadership Network, as well as half of their time coordinating a Colorado River youth program. So if you are interested in this position, it says will be posted soon, but it actually was posted this morning. So please go to that website and please share it with your networks. So thank you. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Deb, who's going to speak first. So Deb Krol is the Indigenous Affairs reporter. She's an award-winning journalist with an emphasis on Indigenous environmental and science issues, and who's fond of saying that her beat is Indians. She's an enrolled member of the Alone. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Alone's
Okay.
good.
Okay. So it's not right.
It's right. No, there's 2 ways to pronounce it, either Alone or Hakalom. So
Okay.
potato,
Alone.
potato.
Selenian tribe from the Central California coastal ranges. In addition to more than a dozen other awards, including the National Press Foundation's Freddie Award, a Nina Mason Pulliam Environmental Reporting Award, a Society and Environmental Journalists Award, and Society of Features Journalism. Deb was named Best Beat Environmental Reporter by the Native American Journalists Association. So thank you for joining us, Deb. I will turn it over to you. And please, if there are any questions, feel free to add them in the chat and we'll collect them for the end.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. Again, Akish, I'm Debra Krol, my descendant of Juan Utacia, the first colonial recorded Salinan Indian. So we carry his name in honor of the fact that he was also one of the first Salinan Indians to get imprisoned in a mission. But so I've been reporting on Indian country for more than 25 years, and a lot of that concerns natural resources, water, mining, land use, environmental issues with Native communities, and specifically for the last several years, what happens when different administrations come into power. So starting with most recently Bears Ears. That national monument was established by President Obama in the last days of his administration after calls by the 5 tribes in the area and some of the supporting tribes to protect a lot of the very significant cultural and spiritual resources. We know that area has been systematically looted over the years. It's a sad situation, and tribes applauded getting that extra protection for the land. And Donald Trump comes into office in January 2017, and it didn't take him long to start slashing national monuments. And Bears Ears was one of the very first to go. It was sliced down by probably 90%. There were some other things that he had done, including fast tracking mining, fast tracking other natural resource issues that impede upon tribal ancestral properties, tribal cultural properties, increasing fracking, increasing oil and gas extraction, and a lot of those damaged tribal sites. The the thing is that we all know that many, if not most, cultural sites that are important to tribes are not within the boundaries of their reservations, and a lot of them are on public lands. And so Bears Ears, of course, was public lands. A lot of the oil fields are on public lands. Mining, lithium, copper, iron, rare metals. If some mining company could make money off of it, Trump administration was going to approve it. And one of the biggest things that happened during that administration, of course, was the protest at Standing Rock over the Keystone oil pipeline, which eventually didn't get built. So that was at least one win, but for that win, there was a lot of losses and a lot of ongoing situations. And I'm going to start dropping in a few things that I had been covering. The first one being, I actually used to work for Vice News, believe it or not. And one of the first things I did for them was what happened with Bears Ears. Now you have to understand this is Vice, so the headlines are a little crazy. But that's not all that he did. I'm going to drop in another one from Vice News that it's not just Native people here on the continent who are affected by his policies. Of course, we have the Alaskan natives up with the oil and the oil slopes, and Native peoples in what they call unincorporated territories. And one of them I just dropped was Guam, with the Native Chamorro people who had finally gotten some land that they could put their homes on, because land in Guam is very expensive, and the governor of Guam established a little homeland for them, and some non-native people sued to get rid of the Chamorro only policy, because they said, well, they're not federally recognized as a tribe. So that one tells a little bit about what happened there. I believe that at the end of the day, they did prevail, but it's still mostly Chamorro who live on that little piece of land. And then we've got the Mashpee Wampanoag, who finally had gotten their trust land established after 400 years of trying to make sure that their little piece of Cape Cod was protected, and that they could self-govern themselves on their own land. Trump administration tried to overturn that. Again, they did not prevail. The Mashpees did manage to hang on to their reservation status, and they still have it now. The casino issue hasn't resolved itself, but at least they still have a reservation and they can still manage their own affairs in their little piece of trust land. And then going on to an issue that's of big local importance here in the Southwest is Oak Flat. I'm not going to put every single Oak Flat story I did, but this one in particular, in the waning days of the Trump administration, the final environmental impact statement, which was going to open up the way for Resolution Copper, which is a subsidiary of the British Australian mining firm Rio Tinto, to get the deed to 2,200 acres of national forest land, which incorporates Oak Flat, and I know I'm going to mangle the Apache name, Chichil Bigotil, or the place where the emery oaks grow. It's a place of great spiritual importance. There were a lot of altars there. There's smudge lodgings there. There's a lot of petroglyphs there. It's also a very important food source for Apache people. Again, emery the Emery oak with the acorns that sustain people. There's a lot of water there. It's a one of the few remaining undisturbed riparian zones in Arizona. So it's a homeland for wildlife, for the four-leggeds, for the birds, and for other living creatures. And it was under a mining ban until 2014, in the waning days of a congressional session, when a coalition of Arizona congressmen colluded to get literal last minute, we call it the Midnight Rider, attached to a must pass defense act. And that did pass. And ever since then, Apache people and their allies have been fighting to overturn what they call the land swap. So 5 days before the end of the Trump administration, they issued the final environmental impact statement, which opened up a 60-day window within which the Forest Service could hand the keys over the Resolution Copper, and then Resolution Copper would do what it was planning to do, which was to basically turn Oak Flat into a 2-mile wide, 800-foot deep crater to extract a large amount of copper from that area. Fortunately, about a month into the Biden administration, that final environmental impact statement was overturned. Apache stronghold, the San Carlos Apache tribe, and a coalition of environmentalists filed 3 different lawsuits. The Apache stronghold lawsuit is currently awaiting review by the Supreme Court to see if they will accept it as a case in their upcoming session. The other 2 lawsuits are on hold, waiting to see when or if now the incoming Trump administration tries to reissue the environmental impact statement, upon which they have told me they're going to reactivate those lawsuits. It's something definitely that we are continuing to watch. I've probably written 30, 40 articles plus various other things on it. And these are things that we anticipate the Trump administration is going to try to reverse engineering Bears Ears again, to get the Apache, Oak Flat back on track to hand over the resolution. And of course, we have the issues with lithium mining in culturally and environmentally sensitive areas. We're following something up in Wickiup, Arizona, in the Big Sandy watershed that the Wallapai people have been fighting. Even just the test holes, they say, are starting to drain their seeps and springs, and particularly Hakwame, which is a very sacred hot spring southwest of or southeast of Wickiup, in part of a very culturally important area called the Salt Trail. And for those of you who don't know the salt trails, these are trade routes, they're pilgrimage routes, they're very important to Native peoples. There's also a salt trail on the other side of the mountains along the Colorado River Valley that tribes are trying to protect by putting in 2 more national monuments. We don't know if Biden's going to establish those 2, Chuckwalla and Quatzon, by the end of his term, but it's a pretty good bet that if he does, Trump will try to overturn them. So like I said, I'm not going to take too much more time, but these are a lot of the things that we're watching. And of course, the uranium issue, the ancestral footprints of the Grand Canyon National Monument, we think might be on his hit list also. And I'm sure Bidtah is going to talk a lot about the uranium issue, the fact that there's mines that still haven't been cleaned up after what, 50, 60, 70 years, and the possibility that one existing mine within the monument will leak radioactivity into the groundwater sources that feed the Colorado River, and particularly are the only source of water for the Havasupai tribe. So you can be assured we're going to keep watching. We're going to keep raising awareness of these issues and give people the information they need to make a decision to call their Congress people or do whatever they think they need to have to do. So that's pretty much my thing. And if you go to azcentral.com, all my articles are free to read. So please take some time and go through them. And also, if you have any story ideas, you can go there and you can ping me on your own story ideas, and we will do our best to cover them. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Deb, for that that coverage. And maybe if you want to plug in your contact information or the link to contact you in the chat, that would be great. So we're going to go ahead and transition to our next speaker. Our next speaker is a co-founder of the Indigenous Women's Leadership Network, Bidtah Becker. She is also a citizen of the Navajo Nation and currently serves as the Chief Legal Counsel to the Navajo Nation President Nygren and Vice President Richelle Montoya. Before this role, she served as the director of the Navajo Nation Division of Natural Resources, overseeing 12 departments, including agriculture, parks, forestry, and land development, mine remediation, archaeological and cultural resources, and water resources, with a staff of more than 500. Bidtah's career has been dedicated to serving the Navajo Nation and its natural resources in several different roles since 2002, with the exception of a 9-month sojourn as the California EPA Deputy Secretary of Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and Border Relations as an appointee of Governor Newsom. All right, I'm gonna, there's lots more to Bidtah's career. That's just a snippet, but Bidtah, I'd like to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Talia. And I just want to take a minute to sing Deb's praises. She does excellent work. I think she had the best article coming out of CRUA, the Colorado River Water Users Association, last week, explaining what's happening with the Navajo, I'm sorry, with the Northeast Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act. I do want to, for those who are following that closely, I do want to let you know that conversations are happening, and we're cautiously optimistic that we will obtain the seven basin states consent soon. And then secondly, I want to just thank so many people for joining this afternoon. I'm overwhelmed by the number of participants. I know many of you, but if you have time, I'd appreciate you putting in the on your name who you're affiliated with, whether tribe, work, whatever you feel comfortable doing. So let me pick up where Deb left off, which was on the monuments. Yeah, I think we all expect there to be continued battling over Bears Ears. It's the local folks, and I want to be clear because there are Navajo local folks who don't support the monument, and I think, yeah, I'm pausing because I think, Navajo is a very large, not I think, we are a very large tribe, 400,000 plus members, size of Washington. And so a lot of times when I'm on panels like this, we're like, we are providing a different perspective. And so I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that there are Navajo individuals who don't support the monument. And my understanding in speaking with them is those individuals don't support it because they prefer local control over federal control. And maybe I think that is a theme that I would encourage all of you to think about as we enter yet another administration shift. So I'm, as you heard Talia say, a couple decades into this career of mine, and so we've gone from, let's just start with Obama. We went Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump. Yeah, so let me finish with the monuments thing, and then I'll shift to what I think my real expertise is. On the monument on the Grand Canyon, I don't know enough to know if that's going to be on the chopping block, because what I don't know is how many business interests are affected by the monument. Because remember, the monument only addresses future activity, not past activity. So if there's already somebody out mining or something, that monument doesn't stop that prior activity. So I'm not clear on whether the Grand Canyon Monument will be on the chopping block. Now, one of the things that the Trump administration may be looking at with the monuments is the attempt to have co-stewardship. I think that's the term we're using now, is co-stewardship. Sometimes you hear co-management, but I think stewardship is the right term, because at the end of the day, when you read these agreements, the federal government still has the final say, but they are allowing greater and greater voice into co-stewardship. It might be those kinds of things that the Trump administration might be more interested in revisiting. And so yeah, and so let me be super clear, because when we have been, as the Nygren administration, we have been looking at, how are things going to shift, and the monuments definitely go to the top of the list. And then you're wondering, why don't I have a longer list than that? Well, for a tribe like Navajo that's been in the energy field for so long, we can shift. So if the Trump administration is going to de-emphasize, let me use the term, I'm trying to figure out what term it is that I'm looking for, because in the energy field, we have to be very careful of the terms you use. So there's non-carbon emitting energy, there's fossil fuel, there's renewable, there's all sorts of different types of energy. Industry is still waiting to see if the administration is going to do a hard shift away from, let me call it, the clean energy work, away from that. And there are some folks who don't think we're going to see a big shift because there's too much money already in place. But what we might see, say, is more emphasis in doing things like carbon capture. So you're emphasizing fossil fuel development, but you're still going to capture the carbon. So that will be interesting to see what kind of shift the administration does. Again, why would they not do a hard shift? Because there's so much money out there that's being put in place that translates into local jobs or local benefits, that it's not necessarily something that every politician in Washington, D.C., regardless of whether you're an R or D, they may not want to see some of the funding that's already out there pushing energy development. They may not want to see that go away because it's benefiting their constituents. But for a tribe like Navajo, we can shift. So we have some of the best solar and wind resources in the country, but we have, an existing coal-fired power plant that, under the Biden administration, was awarded funding to study whether carbon capture would make sense on the coal-fired power plant. So hopefully what you're kind of picking up on is there are so many things already in place that we may not see shifts, because you may not need to shift. The administration may not need to shift to be consistent with some of the messaging they were doing during their campaign. But let me I think what I want to spend the next 7 minutes I have on is talking about what we were able to do under the Trump administration. Let me start with something called the Royalty Policy Committee. So the Trump administration created something called a Royalty Policy Committee, and they appointed industry, tribes, academics, and I believe some state folks. And again, the reason they appoint tribes is because there are several tribes, including the Navajo Nation, the Southern Ute tribe, who have extensive interest in energy. So we were able to serve on the Energy Policy Committee. And one of the things that we were able to push is I think we did some pretty good work. We were able to use the opportunity to shine a light on, and I just put it in the chat, on something called tribal energy resource agreements. And these are agreements that this is a thing that Congress created to try to help tribes enter the energy field. As of the time, and I think this is still true, as of the time I was on the committee in 2018, and I did a quick search, as of 2021, there still hadn't been a tribe who had entered into one, because the solicitor's office in the Department of the Interior had not defined the term inherently federal function. So I was able to get into the bowels of DOI and try to help our tribal allies within DOI push out some sort of definition so that tribes can take advantage of this tool that Congress created, but hasn't been able to get out of the administration. So and then what I just put into chat now that I think Mia is now putting into what you all see is a report from the Congressional Research Service on tribal energy resource agreements. So so what I'm suggesting is, stay tuned, because we're hearing a lot about we hear a lot about a lot, right? And this transition is no different than every transition I've been through. It's all rumor and rumor mongering and who has the best information until it's not. But if there are opportunities that come up where the Trump administration wants to make big changes, get appointed, get on them, and you really don't know what kind of work you can end up doing. But let me talk about kind of the crowning achievement, and this achievement goes back to the creation of the 10 Tribes Initiative so now I'm switching to the Colorado River. Let's focus on the Colorado River for the next 3-4 minutes that I have. And for those who don't know, in the 1990s, the 10 tribes that clearly have rights to the system, so that's different than tributary water, it's the tribes in the upper basin and then tribes on the river in lower basin and Navajo. The 10 tribes organized itself to have a greater voice in the Colorado River Basin in the 1990s. And the 10 tribes would get more active when there was something to respond to. So the reason that the tribes organized in the 90s is, believe it or not, the United States was talking about what to do with all the extra water, the surplus water in the Colorado River system, which is funny to think about now. But then in the 2000s, I can't remember, it might have started with the Obama administration, but it might have been even earlier. The feds were doing a study of the Colorado River Basin. And the 10 tribes got reorganized to say, hey, you really need to study the tribes separately and apart from the rest of the basin. And the work definitely was ongoing through the Obama administration. Again, I can't remember if it started prior to that. But it was the Trump administration that actually issued the report. So let me again talk about as you all know on this webinar, So, organizational charts are just organizational charts. What matters is the person in the seat. And there were a couple of people in terms of Department of the Interior that were very, very helpful to tribes. One was Brenda Berman, the Commissioner of Reclamation. She's the one that got this report out. And if you are in the Colorado River Basin and working, please use this report. A lot of work went into this report. A lot of excellent technical work went into this report. And you should know what's in this report because a lot of the folks in DOI are very familiar with this report. And this can be a good starting point for tribes to have conversations with reclamation, because the big thing coming up with the Colorado River is what's called the post-2026 guidelines. And what that is the shortage guidelines are they expire in December 2026? And that's why it's called post 2026. And so the work is being done right now, and the next administration will have a lot of input onto the post 2026 guidelines. So I've gone for a little over 14 minutes. So let me wrap up there. And I'm just racking my brain to see and looking at my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted. Oh, yes, this is an important thing too. Under the Trump administration, they created something called the Water Subcabinet. And I'm hearing rumors that they may create this again. That's a very, like I said, like the Royalty Policy Committee, that Water Subcabinet, what it does is it brings people from all across the federal government to come together to talk about water. That's a good thing, and that would be a great thing if the Trump administration reinstates that. So thanks, Talia. I'll end there and happy to answer any questions or share more information. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much, Bidtah, and thanks, Deb. I kind of wanted to stay on the Colorado River subject for just a second, and I wanted to, Deb, start with you on and Bidtah too. Like, what were you hearing at last week's conference on the Colorado River as far as administration changes?
Who, me first? Well, I didn't really hear much on the administration changes. What I gathered is that Reclamation is basically holding its breath, waiting to see who's going to be the new commissioner and what changes this administration will make, and I just think they're spinning their wheels until after January 20th. We do have a new a possible incoming Interior Secretary who at least understands tribes, which is a good thing. I hear that he has a lot of good stuff. The 5 North Dakota tribes trust him, which is more than they can say for the South Dakota governor. So maybe we'll have somebody in reclamation of that caliber. Are we going to have another Camille Touton? Are we going to have another Brenda Berman? That would be good if we did. But last week was mostly very tense. I think everyone's afraid they're going to lose a few acre feet here and there, and everybody realizes that they're going to have to give something up. Now the thing is how much is everyone going to have to give up? How's the hydrology looking? And in the shift from snow to rain, does this mean we're going to be having to build more dams, or are we going to, do more things like recharging aquifers, because aquifers don't have to worry about evaporation, and a lot of what these policies seem to me to be doing is accounting for how much surface water evaporation there is. Well, put them in the aquifer, there won't be any. But yeah, it's mostly, who's going to have to lose what. Is Colorado going to go down more? Is the upper basin going to be expected to give up more of its water, or is it going to, or the Lower Basin state's going to make a water call, which won't be fun. And I think everybody is scared of litigation, but it seems like it's going to end up going to litigation unless cooler heads prevail. And of course, the Northeastern Water Settlement Bill, I'm hoping somebody will realize it needs to pass here in the next week.
Thank you. And what about you, Bidtah?
So, the John Ensminger, who's Nevada's representative, governor's representative on Colorado River Matters, his go-to line is elections don't change precipitation, right? So in terms of the new administration, look, Brenda Berman was great. She was great. So, but it also took almost a year to get her into the position. So as exactly as Deb said, they're gonna the permanent staff is holding their breath until they know who it is, and then it's a lot of work on the permanent staff to get somebody then through the Senate and then into their seat. So they'll be doing a lot of briefing while at the same time trying to move forward post 2026 guideline conversations. So yeah, I think I'm kind of hearing I think it's one of the great things about doing water is it really is a bipartisan issue, right? No politician wants to be blamed for when somebody turns the tap and nothing comes out, right? Nobody wants that. We like to think of sometimes federal politics as being about the big issues, but you know what? Sometimes politics is still about, is there a pothole in my street, right? And water crosses that boundary. There was one other thing on the new administration. Oh, just have to, yeah, I agree with Deb. In terms of Indian affairs, we're not hearing anything real negative about the individual. And so I did, in preparation for this, I poked around, I was asking people, are you hearing the lower level, the granular folks? And nobody's hearing anything on the lower level people in the chain. And so what that may mean is it may, like it took a year for Brenda Berman, it may take another year. So, for those who do Colorado River work, that means Dave Palumbo is going to be the key person that you're going to have to work with. And everybody knows Dave and trusts him. So, again, it's a lot of work for the permanent staff, but for those of us who've been doing this work a long time, at least, we know them, we know how to work with them. And finding time is really what's going to be the issue. Finding time is what's challenging in any transition.
Thank you. So we are taking questions. You can type your question into the question and answer chat or into the webinar chat, which I've been enabled everyone to be able to use. So we do have a question here. Maybe Bidtah, I'll ask you to answer this one first, and then Deb, you can go. Do you think that the next administration will understand what trust responsibility is?
So I've been doing this a long, long time. And I will tell you, my go-to line is, don't ever use the phrase trust responsibility. When you go in to deal with federal officials, you tell them what your issue is, and you tell them how you're going to solve it. Let me be really, really, really specific for the Navajo Nation. If anybody followed the Supreme Court, you heard about Arizona versus Navajo Nation. And you know that the United States Department of Justice said they have the United States has no enforceable trust responsibility. Enforceable is the key word to essentially, I'm paraphrasing. So the lawyers on the webinar, forgive me, but essentially no enforceable trust responsibility to help the Navajo Nation develop its water. Okay. Let me be so this is during the Biden administration. Let me be super clear. The reason they ruled that way was because of under the Obama administration. The Obama administration took a similar position, and it resulted in case law that is resulting in this what enforceable responsibility does the United States have? Okay, so let's talk about trust responsibility in a non-enforceable way. So I was on a panel the other day or a couple months ago with Bob Anderson, the lead attorney for for the Department of Interior, and he reported that he went to his boss, Secretary Holland, and said, just because we don't have an enforceable responsibility doesn't mean we don't have a responsibility. And so we're going to support the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act. Let me tell you one other story. Navajo generating station was shutting down. It started on literally the same time, however many years ago, when we went from Obama to Trump. And so so those who go to CRUA, Colorado River Water Users Association, like that CRUA was all about Navajo generating station. This CRUA is all about Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act. But the trust responsibility, in my opinion, really comes down to the individual official who's acting. And there were mid-level career people who transitioned from the Obama administration to the Trump administration and were able to do really good work with us to help us transition as gently as possible when the largest coal-fired power plant west of the Mississippi closes, that's located on tribal land and has 3,000, total of 3,000 employees. I mean, it's a hard hit for anybody, but they were not these people. We were meeting with them weekly. They were finding resources for us, and they were never told to stop. So it is again about, at the end of the day, it's about public servants being public servants. And it's so imperative on us as tribal folks to learn to work with people and to learn to have real conversations, and so that when the going gets tough, either I can call them or they can call me and be like, hey, how do we needle through this? So hopefully that's helpful. Kind of not answering the question, but kind of answering.
And kind of following Bidtah, one of the things that I've been reporting on for years and years and years is consultation. Tribes want people to come to them and say, instead of saying, I've spent $100 million on this project, what do you think? They want consultation to be the first thing that these natural resource and extractive firms do. Come to the tribe and say, we have an idea. And before we spend $100 million developing a plan, let's sit down and talk. And it doesn't seem to matter who's the president. Tribal consultation continues to be an issue, and trying to we know that Biden made pinky promises. We're going to beef up consultation, and we continue to see, well, I have yet to talk to a tribe who was happy with the consultation they got. So if anybody is listening, that was, we're hoping that this administration might actually be the one to figure out that if they talk to the tribes early rather than later, everybody will save money, clutching of pearls and or squash blossom necklaces, gnashing of teeth, and save litigation dollars. Is this going to, is Trump too going to be the one to do it? Well, I'm just going to have to wait and see. But that's one of the big things that administrations seem to never seem to understand, and especially the lower levels. I've said it once, and I was going to say it again, that there are people in the federal bureaucracy who are afflicted with the case of we've always done it this way ism, and trying to write that, trying to turn the course. Deb Haaland had did what she could, but she's one person, and they need about 12 Deb Haalands in a row to get that ship turned. Or we need, even though Biden tried, he didn't get too far either. But consultation, to me, that's always the biggest issue that any administration, if they could tackle that and solve it, that would solve so many of our issues right there.
Thank you for that. Bidtah, I know you had mentioned the Navajo Nation water settlement. Can you mention again how folks on the webinar might be able to support those efforts?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, well, I do want to, let me just, since I have the floor, just glom onto what Deb's saying. I think when it comes to consultation, it is imperative to the tribal folks, if you're working for your tribe, to be super specific to when you're in consultation, right? It is because remember, we're a big country, and despite the fact that people think the federal government's too big, there aren't enough of them to meet the needs of everybody. But I think that be strategic as we're going into this new administration, because you have the governor of North Dakota. He gets it. He's a rural state, and he knows more than anybody that these big federal solutions never work locally. So Deb and I are saying the same thing, just giving you different language. Okay, so back to the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act. Because this gets complicated quickly, and I'm not sure if everybody is a Colorado River student on here. But so 3 tribes are settling, Navajo, Hopi, San Southern Paiute. San Southern Paiute will receive its reservation through this legislation as well. It'll be the second reservation to be wholly in within the boundaries of the Navajo Nation. So, but because the Navajo Nation is the only tribe in the entire United States that has lands in the upper basin and the lower basin. So remember in 1922, the 7 states came together and bifurcated the system into 2. We want to move water from upper to lower. And so the 7 states need to, it all depends on who you ask, but at least one state will say, well, we need to give Congress permission to do that. And so we call it a consensus letter. The 7 states need to come together to sign a consensus letter. And we have not yet gotten that letter signed. If you were at CRUA last week, you saw us wearing our pins. I have mine somewhere. Consensus now, free Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act. The bad news is we didn't get the consensus letter signed. The good news is we did make tremendous progress last week. We are continuing to make tremendous progress this week, and we are still knocking on wood that we're going to get that consensus letter signed in a matter of days. Congress will not act until that consensus letter is signed. So once it's signed, I'll let Talia, Mia, and everybody know. And then at that point, yes, it will be very helpful for folks to be calling their senators and congresspeople and saying, get this passed immediately. If people want to act now, you can say something like, once the 7 states sign this letter, please act immediately. But Congress will not act until the 7 states sign. So no sense sending a letter right now, because the senators will say, oh, is this a letter signed? Did I not hear? But yeah, again, we are hopeful. And for those just generally following water, there are 12 bills in Congress right now. There's a lot of activity in Indian water. Again, bipartisan support. There's a lot of activity in a lame duck session. So we're all on pins and needles, watching Congress and seeing what's going to come out before they recess.
Thank you. So we have about 7 minutes left, and I just want to provide some time. Maybe Deb, we can start with you with some closing thoughts.
Well, for closing thoughts, I've been through several of these administration changes, and a lot of what Bidtah says is really the way it is, that the core staff will still be there. Policy directions might change here and there, but so much of what is there is kind of set in stone. Like consultations, like agreements, like laws, that there's, you would have to have 4 Trumps in a row to turn the ship around, the same as you would have to have 4 Democrats in a row to turn the ship around. So the best thing is to keep doing your jobs. Call me up if there's something I need to report on. We'll do our best to continue to educate, not only Indian country, but non-Indian people about what's going on so they can make informed decisions, and just take a deep breath and keep doing your jobs. As one lady from the U.S. Geographical Survey told me last week.
So a couple of things along the lines of what Deb was saying about maybe this administration will fix consultation. And I could imagine a number of people are like, are you kidding me? Again, the work is done by permanent staff. And one of the things that the Biden administration was able to do was train a heck of a lot of people in Indian stuff. And I know because I was part of that. I was there helping, like, just explain to people who never even heard of an Indian tribe. And I think that all of these folks, as Deb is saying this, like flip-flopping every 4 years, people are scratching their head and they realize something isn't working right now. Maybe we need to listen a little bit harder, because remember I said never use the term trust responsibility. For years in Colorado River Basin, I would say, for those who know Daryl, V Hill, and Matt, I would say, have you listened to the farmers? Farmers and Indians sound like the exact same person, right? Right, Deb? Like, we are shortly opinionated, we're tied to the land, it's cultural, like, you have to find your allies. And I think that the more you educate federal officials, the more they start to realize, wow, like, I never really thought, but like, yeah, you know what? Maybe these Indian issues aren't that different, especially for rural Indians. Let me be super clear. I'm talking about rural Indians.
Yeah.
They're, my specialty is water and clean drinking water systems. And the number of systems that exist in Indian country that serve both non-Indian and Indian communities is tremendous. I mean, because the fundamental basic issues are the same. It's expensive to move water. You've got to have systems that work. So if you've been working with the Biden administration, keep these are the same folks that are going to be there. And they still, until Congress changes some of these laws, they still have to operate under, the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act. They're still trying to push money out. The other thing to remember is we are, despite what you hear, it's still a 3-branch government. We still haven't gotten rid of the 3-branch government. And for those who were at Krol last week, you saw me choke up reading Neil Gorsuch's dissent. And you all know what Neil Gorsuch did in McGurk. Trump appointee. So, that, who knew? I remember Mike Connor saying, like, I didn't, like, we had heard about this guy, but we didn't know anything about him. I mean, this gentleman has done more for Indian law than any single justice has, definitely in my lifetime, but maybe since the Marshall Trilogy. And, Deb's shaking her head. So remember, there's just, Indian affairs they're not easily breakable into R&D, and natural resources are not. So we can find allies and keep looking for them.
Yeah. I have one other thing. I'm going to shut my mic off. The first time I went up to WikiUp for the lithium mine issue, they went over to the elementary school into their little auditorium, and here's the Wallapai tribal government and some of the cultural people and some of the non-Indian WikiUp residents, and this lady, pulls up in this big monster pickup truck, throws 2 Trump flags up and marches in, and the lithium people are trying to explain what they're going to do and it's going to be good. And all of a sudden, that lady and some other non-Indians and the Wallapies all got up and said, basically told them that was a bunch of bullpucky, and we know what you guys are doing, and none of us like it. And the farmers, I mean, the ranchers looked at the Wallapai, and the Wallapai looked at the ranchers and go, "You mean you don't want it either?" I mean, that right there, it's exactly what Bidtah is talking about. Find your allies, yeah, folks. And then call me up, I'll write about it.
Awesome. I love that story. Thank you, Deb, and thank you, Bidtah, for your time today. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending this webinar. It is recorded and will be posted on our website. And please do share the job posting for the IWLN position at National Wildlife Federation. So thank you so much. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.